to connect you to online. Now we are online, sir. So you are going to start the session.
Let's
In
start.
case if we receive any question, we'll transfer it to you, and then we'll see it in your screen below in the chat icon, sir.
Okay,
Glad
thank
to
you.
speak, sir.
So thank you, Faisal, and of course, thanks to the organizers of this conference for the great effort, which is truly praiseworthy, because it's always praiseworthy to spread the word of history of economic thought around the world, and especially in your country. So very special thanks to SEMA for organizing this session and for inviting me even to chair the session. So I'm very honored to be here. The session, the title of the session is The Economic of Social Issue. So I'm not only supposed to be the chair, but also the first speaker. As far as I know, there is one of the presenter that cannot attend the session, so we should be three. Rossella Di Federico, me of course, and Haluk Yergin Mustafa, who is here. Okay, so thanks for being here. So Sema, should I start right now?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank
thanks. So it's truly 20, in Italy it's 8, in Turkey it's 22 or 10 p.m.
10
Okay,
p.m.
so yeah, so let me start. So I'm going to share the screen. I think the attendance knows the rule. We have got 20 minutes each and 10-15 minutes at the end of the session for discussions. So I think we can simply start, and I will then introduce your presentation later. In this case, I will have to introduce myself. So I should say, Paolo Silvestri, the floor is yours. But let's start in this unconventional way. So let me try first to share the screen. Okay, here it is. Okay, do you see the slides? Okay.
Yes, Professor.
Okay, very good. Okay, so my paper is about an attempt to explain percentage tax institutions by restarting from Sagden's contractarianism. Another possible way to explain what I'm going to do, okay, let me just start the chronometer before I forget in this case. Okay. Another way to explain what I'm going to do is to retitle, so to say, the paper in this sense, the strange case of Dr. Taxpayer and Mr. Charity. What I'm going to tell you is, first of all, an introduction to the percentage tax designation institution through the Italian 8 per thousand and 5 per thousand, which is the most famous, at least in Italy, but there are also other types of similar institutions around the world, especially in Central and Eastern European countries. I will tell you more about this later. And then I will explain you the plan of the presentation. So the best way to start is to try to answer this question: what are percentage philanthropy? Sometimes they are named percentage philanthropy or percentage tax designation institutions. In a sense, they can be defined as fiscal institution or tax scheme by which taxpayer can freely designate a certain percentage of their income tax to either the state or churches or religious confession, and this is the so-called 8 per thousand, or in the case of the 5 per thousand, you can destinate part of your income tax or a percentage of your income tax to a specific non-profit, non-governmental organization, scientific or health research, or entities whose main activity is of public interest. Here you see the classic part of your the form through which you can destinate your 5 or 8 per thousand. In this case, the scheme is the 5th per thousand. Once you are in front of the tax consultant, you can simply say, okay, I want to give this 0.5% of my income tax, for example, to finance the university or the third sector and so forth. So you will simply have to sign the box, put the ID code of the beneficiary, and then your money will go to this beneficiary according to your choice. These are the kind of advertisement that you will see, for example, during the period of the year when you are expected to give your money to one of these beneficiaries, for example, Médecins Senza Frontières, and many other activities, many other entities belonging, as I said, to the voluntary sector, but also to many others. To give you an idea of the impact and scope of the Italian percentage philanthropy, or tax percentage designation institution, consider that every year almost 50% of Italian taxpayers choose to give their 0.8% and 0.5%. And around 1.8 billions are redistributed to the beneficiaries via the percentage philanthropy. Again, and also constantly, there is this kind of constant increase of the number of taxpayers expressing the choice to give, the resources redistributed, and the number of third sector organizations participating in the mechanism, more than 55,000 entities in the last year. So how to explain the success of this mechanism? Well, in a sense, there have been so many possible explanations or accounts of this mechanism. The case of Sagden is particularly emblematic because he provides an explanation of the Italian 8 per thousand in his latest book, The Community of Advantage. It was published 2 years ago. And he says that this mechanism is a kind of liberal and contractarian approach to the provision of public goods, and also one of those forms of regulation that would be justified as ways of expanding opportunity for mutually beneficial transactions. There have been many other accounts, especially in Central and Eastern European countries, but I can come back on them a little bit later. So what I'm going to claim, first of all, in general, is that I would like to provide a broader theoretical account to explain how and why the percentage philanthropy is a strange case. It has got hybrid characteristics, which in order to be understood would need a new conceptual framework that goes beyond classic dichotomies such as state versus market or voluntary taxation versus coercion, civil society and or voluntary sector versus welfare state, taxation versus charity, or self-interest versus altruism, and many other classic dichotomies that we are used to employ in social sciences. And the reason why I found this mechanism particularly interesting is that it truly seems to be exactly in the middle of this dichotomy. And in particular, what I want to argue is that from an institutional perspective, Sagden's account fits better to the 5th per thousand rather than the 8th per thousand. And the percentage philanthropy is a new type of, as I call it, tax allocation without representation. Also, from a behavioral perspective, taxpayer choice of giving can be framed or understood as a form of, on the one hand, taxpayer sovereignty, implying two kinds of freedom, autonomy and choice, and secondly, this mechanism can be understood as a form of gift without sacrifice. So very quickly, how this mechanism works and why Sagden's contractarianism fits better with the 5th per thousand rather than the 8th per thousand. As I said, Sagden's provide many claims to explain or to provide an account of this mechanism. In this case, in this presentation, I will simply focus on the second and the third that are involved. According to Sagden, the 8 per thousand could usefully be adapted to many cases in which there is divergence in people's belief about which kinds of public goods are valuable and which are not, and presents a very interesting aspect from a contractarian viewpoint. Each taxpayer can choose which fund on the list will receive her 0.8%. So from a contractarian point of view, the interesting aspect, at least from Sagden, but also for me, is that you as taxpayer are free to choose how to use your tax money, at least a share of your tax money. And so you can decide who is the beneficiary of your tax money. It's important to note that in Sagden's account, there is an important normative assumption, the so-called opportunity criterion and related freedom of choice. Opportunity criterion means no more than, more is better than less. So if you have got more choices, if you have got more opportunities, this is better than less opportunities or less choices. So this is also the reason why, in some respects, and I don't want to waste too much time on the technicalities of this mechanism that are explained in the paper. Therefore, if you are interested, I can just write me an email and I can send you the paper. But it's important to note that in the case of the 8 per thousand, 5 per thousand, indeed, there is also the 2 per thousand, which is the mechanism through which you can give your money to political parties. You are, in a sense, at the very moment in which you are signing the box, you are faced with 3 micro-binary choice, such as to give or not to give. So if you choose not to give, and this is the default choice, your tax money, in the case of the 5th per thousand, will go to state coffers by default. So it will go to state coffers anyway. In the case of the 8 per thousand, or your 0.8% of income tax, that share of your income tax will be redistributed anyway among states and religious confessions in proportion to the number of choices expressed by other taxpayers for the state and religious confession. So this is an important difference between the 8th per thousand and 5th per thousand, because in the case of the 8th per thousand, the freedom not to choose is conditioned by the default option. I repeat, if you don't choose to give, in that case, your money will be redistributed anyway. So this is, in a sense, I consider this, and this is my major critique to Sagden, I consider this a violation of the freedom not to choose, which is, as I said, a normative assumption of his account of the 8th per thousand. And it is also a violation of your freedom not to choose, because the redistribution of that money, or that portion, to be more precise, of the fiscal revenue is determined by those who express the choice. So it's very similar to the voting mechanism. If you don't go to vote, others will choose instead of you. If instead you choose to give, and this is the express choice, the taxpayer is faced with a huge subset of possible choices. And I'm not going to explain all of them. It's important to know that in the case of the 5 per thousand, there are an endless array of choices, because you can choose among 5,000 entities, while in the case of the 8 per thousand, the number of choices that you have got is just giving to the state, or give to one of the possible 13, to be more precise, religious confessions. So in this case, the Sagden normative opportunity criterion and implicit freedom of choice is better satisfied in the logic of the 5th per thousand. Now I want to give you my view, my account that I've developed also in other papers related to the 5th per thousand and the 8th per thousand. And this is also why, as I said, a possible new title might be the strange case of the percentage philanthropy, both from the taxpayer point of view and from an institutional point of view. So the first reason why it's better to name this mechanism as a new type of tax allocation without representation can be explained if you consider that in many explanations, many accounts provided for especially the Central and Eastern European countries, this mechanism was considered, especially because they were going out from a communism, they were in the transition phase when this mechanism were introduced. They hoped, in a sense, that this mechanism introduced a kind of fiscal democracy. They named this mechanism as a sort of taxation self-determination. My objection to this way of understanding the institution is this one. First, it's only citizen taxpayers that participate, not every citizen. So why should we call this a kind of fiscal democracy? because in the case of democracy, every citizen is allowed to participate in the voting mechanism and therefore to vote. In the case of the percentage philanthropy, it's in a sense, you have to consider that it is the only existing institution beyond the no taxation without representation principle, because you are not going through the mediation of your representative in parliament. It's you as taxpayer that you have the right to express your decision in terms of who is going to be the beneficiary of your tax money. And also, there is no control and no public discussion over public budget. So a better way to call this kind of mechanism is, as I said, a form of tax allocation without representation. And also because it implements or realizes a decentralized decision process as to which public goods services must be financed. The other point I want to stress is that this mechanism allows for a little bit of taxpayer sovereignty in terms of freedom and autonomy to choose. There is, of course, a possible objection, because this percentage philanthropy, you may say, is still within a statutory mandatory framework, because, as I said, in a sense, it's not that you are deciding how much taxes you have to pay. You simply can choose a little portion. And this is also why my reply to this possible objection is yes and no, because there is still a little bit of sovereignty at stake in this case, because you have the freedom as a form of autonomy. And in this case, the percentage philanthropy is, or can be considered, as I call it, a quasi-voluntary taxation, or a mechanism that allows for a form of quasi-voluntary taxation. And I stress quasi because, of course, it is not entirely voluntary. Your will can be exercised not on the side of the revenue side, so to say, of the public budget, but only on the redistribution of this revenue. So you can simply decide, as I said, who is the beneficiary. And still, it is a form of taxpayer sovereignty. But there is also freedom of choice, as we have seen, especially in the case of the fifth per thousand, because the degree of this freedom depends on the level or sub-level in which the choice is made. This is due to the fact that in the case of fifth per thousand, you have a very wide opportunity set, among which you can choose many beneficiaries and so forth. The third point is that taxpayer choice of giving can be understood as a gift without sacrifice. This is perhaps the most tricky and the most demanding theoretical account of this mechanism. And in order to understand this point, I will resort to this definition of give provided by Caillet and Godbout. They say, we define as a gift every lending of goods or services effected without guarantee of restitution towards the end of creating, nourishing, or recreating the social bond between people involved. So you may say that this mechanism, and this is a possible objection, this mechanism is not a gift. The giving of the 0.5%, and in this case, I'm just considering the 0.5%, but the same can be said for the 8 per thousand. So this giving might be driven by self-interest. Another possible objection is that a gift without sacrifice is not a gift. And thirdly, a gift given either is free or spontaneous, or is not a gift. So let me show you, in conclusion, the three possible counter objections to these objections. My reply to objection one, the objection self-interest objection, is that it's a further question. Are taxpayers rational maximizer of their utility or return, and capable of doing an informed choice? In a previous study, I showed, together with some colleagues of mine, that most taxpayers do not know the exact amount of their 0.5%. They do not know what they may get in return. And thirdly, the timing of the return. So they don't know when this return is going to come back. Even if they choose a beneficiary that they know, they don't know when this money is going to come back. And above all, if we remain stuck to definition that I showed you before, there is no guarantee of return. Therefore, this giving, in a sense, is and remain a form of gift. The second objection, that there is no gift without sacrifice, I may counter object that what about everyday little gift giving gestures or acts, as when we say it's the thought that counts. So even if it costs you nothing, if it doesn't, even if it's not so expensive, because it's just a very little sacrifice, and indeed, in a sense, you may perceive it as something that really costs you nothing, it's still something that is relevant for the beneficiary, as I will say in the third and last objection. What is important in any case is to consider that it might be considered as a form of altruism, in the literal sense of doing good to the other or the beneficiary. Why? Because giving or not giving makes all the difference from both the givers and, above all, from the receiver's point of view. Because if beneficiary receives taxpayer 0.5% of income tax, from beneficiary's point of view, it is a gift anyway, because you will receive this anyway. If taxpayer aims at doing good to the beneficiary, then she'll have to give anyway. Last but not least, the strong objection is that gift giving either is free or spontaneous or is not a gift. In a sense, you have to consider that you are not forced to give your tax money. So this is the paradox, the so-called paradox of institutionalized solidarity. Institutionalized solidarity is not necessarily an oxymoron. Because the strange case of the percentage philanthropy is a sort of a third way between institutionalized solidarity versus spontaneous solidarity. For example, welfare state versus third sector. Why? Because percentage philanthropy does not institutionalize solidarity or altruism, nor does it force taxpayer to be altruistic. It simply institutionalizes the possibility of being altruistic. Okay. Thank you. And this is...
Thanks for inviting me. My speech will focus on some sociological thoughts regarding precarious work, especially in Italy, and the role of trade unions in the counter-flexible labor market. So, as many knows, in Europe, the Fordist model of organization of production spreads after the Second World War within large verticalized companies in which are realized in predetermined times and with specialized machines, standardized goods at low cost. Fordism is the backbone of a society founded on a real compromise, work in exchange for social protection. Thanks to his total commitment to company, worker has the opportunity to buy what he helped to produce. And above all, he benefits from social protections such as guarantees of a minimum wage, free time, and a just cause in case of dismissal. After the second half of 60s, the international socio-economic scenario changed, and the Fordist model of production goes into crisis. In fact, in those years, in the most economically developed countries, the saturation of the industrial durable goods market, from cars to household appliances, was reached, and demand began to settle on smaller volumes of increasingly diversified, personalized, and quality products. In the new transnational socio-economic framework, thanks to the advent of globalization, many changes take place. And the most important innovation is that everything, work, company size, production, adapts to the new demand, which is more variable and more sophisticated than that in the Fordist society. This results in increased flexibility, both for work and companies that need to be fluid, ready to speed up or slow down, and even get bigger or smaller on the basis of the flow of the market. In this new context, centralization of production becomes too expensive, and large companies begin to outsource, decentralizing phases of the production process to smaller companies, the sub-suppliers. This leads to a deterioration of the value creation process, since large companies spread the various stages or steps of production in different structures spread over territories that are also distant from each other. The production line in this way goes from vertical to horizontal. The once large enterprises thus become the composition of small companies. In this way, workforce is fragmented into a plurality of places, weakening the associative power of employees and also unions. This process of vertical disintegration of companies through the practice of outsourcing increases the precariousness of employment issues and the deconstruction of social protection systems. In fact, the set of responsibilities and risks passes from community to individual. A new concept of work and protection is spreading in this period. Fragmentation of production chain also minimizes the concept of social aggregation between workers and between them with the surrounding environment, and to the reduction of traditional permanent employment contracts with the aim to minimize production labor costs. In Italy, the Fordist model of production reached its peak during the 80s, with a delay of a few decades compared to the United States, considered the cradle of Fordism, but also the other European nations such as Germany and Great Britain. In the second half of the 80s, the concentration of production in a single large company entered the crisis following the social cultural change described above, which also involved Italy and especially the Northwest, where companies of larger dimensions and socioeconomic development were more advanced than in other areas of the country. These changes lead to a number of transformations for workforce. For example, fragmentation of work, previously described, possibility of less regulation on employment patterns, layoff, job transfers, early retirement, worker mobility, forced resignations. These are some of the means used in Italy to send home workers that large companies can no longer maintain. In general, labor markets should comply with certain rules and regulation designed to protect employees from different types of risks. Above all, the risk of unemployment and job uncertainty, but it should also protect workers from the risk of inadequate working conditions, discrimination, and low trade union representation, or in general with regard to working hours, job security, and remuneration. Starting from the end of the 17th, but especially towards the 18th and 19th, in Italy, this protection began to decrease. Companies acquire more decision-making power over the production organization and also over working condition of employees. The new attitude toward deregulation leads to the introduction in the labor market of new forms of contract, different from the typical one, open-ended and full of guarantees. This change of economic, social, and political context modifies largely the cultural climate in which industrial relations are realized. At the beginning of the 19th, characterized by economic competition, international cooperation, and flexibility of workforce, a profound economic and political crisis led to implementing a series of reforms that upset the regulation of the Italian labor market and also industrial relations. The 40s era was, as we know, characterized by severe restrictions on hiring and firing workers, certainty on rights, low overall unemployment, less institutionalized industrial relations, strong presence of trade unions, especially in big companies. But from the 19th onwards, a new, more dynamic context enters the scene. The new types of contracts follow one another, in addition to the standard permanent contract that is always the most coveted by workers, of course. But now they have different and fewer guarantees than in the 40s era. European and capitalist countries, not just Italy, of course, have witnessed a significant increase in atypical work patterns and self-employed jobs. And these new types of non-traditional contracts include works characterized by no continuity in execution, with shorter time working than standard contracts. Particularly in my country, there has been a strong growth of fixed term, temporary work, contracts on call, through which companies temporarily employ those who cannot find work or circumvent the traditional legislative or contractual constraints. Furthermore, in Italy, non-standard employment is often related to a situation of job insecurity, in which work has a series of negative elements, such as low level of remuneration, reduced safety standards in the workplace, low level of social protection, low quality of professional training, and little possibility of union representation. Most workers hired under a non-standard contract tend not to join a union because of the discontinuity and temporary nature of the work. Knowing from the start that that job wasn't last long makes people desist from making tires or efforts to improve their condition. In addition, atypical employees often tend to act in a submissive manner in the hope of getting a more stable and advantageous contract. In some cases, they attempt to impress employees by appearing as robots with no need, no privacy, or signs of fatigue. They avoid conflicts, resist exploitation, avoid unpleasant situations for the employer, such as getting sick, having children, or getting hurt. There is a general lack of rights and protections caused by the discontinuity and heterogeneity of employment. As for the Italian perspective, some believe that temporary jobs can introduce workers into the labor market and therefore be seen as a sort of starting point for a permanent position. Others have shown how these atypical jobs catch people like in a cage, as they get stuck in those places with no certainty on the future, unable to stop risking unemployment. In Italy, fixed-term contracts with so few social protections are very common and don't represent a momentary experience, but a long and continuous one, becoming an integral part of working life. In comparison with the other European countries, In Italy, the incidence of fixed-term work on total employment is highest in the last 20 years. Furthermore, the fact that this type of contract is more widespread among young people shows that in my country, the fixed-term contracts represent the gateway to enter labor market. The increase in unemployment in periods of economic recession, 2008-2009, that has affected especially young people and women with a typical contract, has relaunched in the country the debate on flexicurity, to work on the construction of a system that is able to reconcile greater flexibility with modern social protection systems. In comparison with other European countries that are equipped with systems that combine flexibility and security of the work, Italy still appears very far from achieving this ambitious goal. Intellectuals and politicians question themselves on the model to be inspired by to guide future choices. Among the countries considered as a good example of the balance among flexibility and worker protection, there are certainly Sweden, Netherlands, and above all, Denmark. Particularly, the labor market of the latter country, Denmark, is characterized by the combination of three important elements. First, flexibility that allows a wide mobility of workers within the labor market, thanks to the presence of flexible rules on dismissal and the wide possibility of using non-standard employment contracts. Second, the presence of a universalistic social security system that provides unemployment benefits that amount to 90% of wage for the last 3 months and a maximum duration of 4 years. Third, effective active employment policies aimed at retraining and relocated unemployed people. It's difficult to think of exporting the Danish model to other countries such as Italy, characterized by higher unemployment rates, insufficient resources to support effective active policies, and income support policies adequate to the needs of those who remain unemployed. Where to start then? I'm arriving to my conclusions. As we said before, post-Fordism has generated a world where precarious work have supplanted traditional work full of guarantees, and discontinuity of unemployment and career has become the norm for a very large number of subjects, even with a stable job position. The construction of professional identity, therefore, tends to be based on multiple positions, roles, and professions. Social identification through jobs follows more complex paths because they are less straight and more personal than in the past, with dissociations between the sphere of work and other spheres of existence. All this requires a protective and universalistic network that assists workers in the transitions of careers, that recomposes the various pieces of dependent or self-employed employment. It's therefore necessary that remains a trace of the journeys that from one job to another build the social professional identity of individuals. A trace of citizenship that can consist of a general labor registry or an electronic workbook, as it already happens in other countries. This is the first protection for individual worker. Today, there are many questions which are difficult to answer. One wonders, for example, whether the spaces of individual autonomy can be enhanced and the forms of protections of workers can be diversified without abandoning the historical path of solidarity and equality. Another questions concern whether and in what way a protection that is at the same time lighter and more universalistic can also protect atypical workers. The system of safeguards must be redesigned, first of all, with national legislation, but above all, international one. European Union plays a crucial role in this sense because it should represent a reference for the protection of the labor market. Although bargaining between social partners has satisfied in many countries the need to reconcile citizenship with the market, currently it's inevitable that social protections connected to traditional employment contracts are less than in the past, not only because in the meantime the area of individual self-protection is expanding, but also because the focus of regulation has shifted from the central level to the corporate and territorial level. The emergence of society of precarious works has gone hand in hand with the awakening of the role of trade unions. Trade unions, in addition to fighting against the exploitation of precarious work, are committed to ensuring that atypical workers are guaranteed the same rights as permanent workers in the awareness of the emergence of new protection needs, many of which still need to be defined and built. Compared to the past, it's not only a question of better protecting workers' rights, but also the fate of individuals in their workplace. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Rossella. And sorry, because I forget to introduce the title. I was sure that you were going to share the slides, and so you were going to show the title, so to reduce
Don't
a little
worry.
bit. But anyway, I can tell you right now that the title was Trade Union Representation in the Era of Flexible Labor Relations, Sociological Thoughts.
Thank you so much.
Thanks again, Rossella. Your timing was perfect. And I also forgot to ask you whether you want me to be your reminder. Mustafa, do you want me to be your reminder 5 minutes before the end of your presentation, or you get the timing? You should switch on the microphone.
Yes, hi, everybody.
You want me to be the reminder of your, I mean, at least the time. So can I interrupt you? I hate to interrupt presentations. So that's why I'm asking you whether.
How much time present?
20 minutes, 20 minutes.
20
we
minutes.
are perfectly in time. So if you want, I can stop you. Well, I can simply raise my hand or switch on the microphone and saying 5 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. Greetings.
So Mustafa is going to present from the university. Sorry for my really bad pronunciation. Van Yuzunsu Soli Il. Is it right? the name of the university?
Van Yüzyıl University,
Okay.
from one city of Turkey.
Okay, thank you so much. And
You're
the title
welcome.
of the presentation is Social Transfer Spending, Employment Relations and Economic Growth, the case of Turkey. Thank you.
Firstly, greetings to everyone from the city of Van, which is home to Akdamar Islands. Akdamar Islands is very important for all Christian world and world. I suggest you research, and I would like to invite everyone to one. Our one is nice. I expect you all.
Thank you.
I start. My subject is social transfer spending, employment relation, and economic growth. The case of Turkey, we investigated.
Are
I
you going to
English.
share the slides?
What?
Are you going to share the screen, or it's simply without the slides?
I can't prepare PowerPoint.
Okay.
Only tell, please.
Okay, it's fine.
Okay. Uh, um, uh, since in the sorry, I am hurry up. In the 1970s and after, a change was observed in the social welfare policies of the states with the effect of concept of globalization. It is predicted that the populations gets older, the share of pensions in the budget increases, and the share of health expenditure in the GDP will increase. It is possible for the state to intervene in the reduction of poverty with various policies through social transfer expenditure to improve income in distribution. Its effect on the labor supply may also vary depending on social transfer expenditure program implemented. Social transfer expenditure are among the important tools in combating poverty in many countries. The concept of transfer expenditure is defined as the expenses related to the regaining of the security of the states. As a concept that entered the literature in the mid-20th century with a Pigo 1947. Pigo defines public expenditure as transfer expenditure and non-transfer expenditure, and on are non-refundable payments made by states that have direct effect on GDP. In developed countries, it is aimed to increase the social welfare level of individuals with social transfer expenditures such as unemployment and education assistance and old age assistance, while in developing countries, it is the expenditure made to ensure the realization of the growth and development, which are applied with substitutes. In other words, transfer spending is the change of purchasing power between individual and social groups. Transfer expenditure are classified as debt interests, social benefits, subsidies, social security expenditures, tax refunds, payments made to local administration, and payments made by states' economic enterprises as transfer expenditure. In the literature, the effects of transfer expenditure on income distribution, growth and development, budget deficit, inflation, and employment level have been studied more. Employment is important in terms of permanently reducing poverty and promoting growth. Although there is an increase in economic growth, it does not always provide job opportunities for the poor people of the state. As long as growth does not increase employment, in human progress in human development becomes more difficult, as UNDP 2030. Social transfer expenditures contribute to growth as well as providing social protection to households, alleviating poverty. Social transfer expenditure affect growth through three channels. One, macro levels effect, including the political effects of social transfer expenditure. Two, local economy level effect, improving the functioning of the local economy and labor markets. And three, micro level households effect. The economic effects of transfer expenditure are mostly determined by the optimal size of the government and efficiency of public expenditure and public expenditure. According to Army 1895, it is stated that there is an inverse U relationship between public expenditure and GDP. As can be seen in graph 1, there is a positive relationship between public expenditure and GNP until the public expenditure reach a certain size, and then public expenditure will affect growth negatively depending on increase in public expenditure. The negative impact of transfer expenditure on the economy focuses on exclusion of private saving and their effect on the labor supply. It is that transfer expenditure provide negative externalities by negatively affecting individuals' willingness to work, labor supply, working hours, and desire to save money. The relationship between public expenditure and unemployment is explained in two approaches. In classical approach, the intervention of the state with public expenditure creates distorting effect on the resource allocation by affecting the price in the market. These situations hinders growth and negatively affects growth and increases unemployment. In the Keynesian approach, it is argued that public expenditure are geared towards increasing demand and have effects on the power market for full employment. The necessity of the state in preventing and reducing unemployment by making public expenditure by financial means is emphasized. According to the Keynes, it's stated that the state has a role in determining the employment level by interfering with the economy with fiscal policy tools, current investments, and transfer expenditure in order to ensure economic recovery. According to the ESEU and Garat, transfer expenditure can be used as a precaution against unemployment or as a factor affecting unemployment. It can cause individuals who receive unemployment benefits to decide not to work. However, the transfer expenditure made by the states increases employment in some production areas, leading to an increased employment. Transfer expenditure indirectly affects GDP due to the fact that the transfer expenditure are unrequited. Payments and benefits, unemployment, insurance payments are among the transfer expenditure made for social process. Time is limited because of I briefly tell my subject.
You still have time. It's you got 7 minutes or 7-8 minutes more.
Okay. In the literature review, it is noteworthy that there are deficiencies regarding the effects of transfer expenditure in the literature, although there are many studies on the types of public expenditure and affecting them. Studies examining the effects of transfer expenditure, especially social transfer expenditure, are quite limited in the literature. expenditure are a type of public expenditure made to reduce income inequality. In this study, the effects of the growth of spending, transfer, and relationship with employment is aimed to investigate 1990 to 2019 period of Turkey. In the study, okay. I screen, but I can't.
Mustafa, you are sharing the screen.
I can't I can't see. Okay, no problem. I tell. In this study, social transfer spending for Turkey is investigated, is aimed for econometrics analysis, unit root tests for Turkey, and then co-integration tests is made, and then two causality tests analyzed for Turkey. Hacker-Hatemi causality analysis and Granger causality analysis are variables is not cause, is not there is not causal relationship between the variables for Turkey. And then results, briefly, I will finish. Transfer expenditure consists of transfer expenditures such as unemployment pension and pension, which are made to ensure fair income distribution of developed countries. Transfer expenditure made at higher levels in developed countries are considered as an indicator of the development level of the countries. Economic dimensions of transfer expenditure has been examined for Turkey in this study. In the context of employment and economic growth, there is no clear conclusion that transfer increase or decrease economic growth. Again, unemployment and employment dimensions of transfer expenditure were examined in the literature, and relationship between social transfer expenditure and working hours and leisure time preferences was examined. Econometric analysis results, there is not causality from employment to growth or other variables. There is no co-integration and causality relation for Turkey because Turkey is developing countries, not developing countries. Because of my analysis conclusion is sorry, I finished my presentation. Thank you so much. Listen to me. I can't listen. I can't listen you.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yes, the microphone Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
So I was saying thank you, Mustafa.
You're
And,
welcome. You're welcome for listen to me, everybody. My English is not good.
Don't worry about that. Okay.
I understand, but not good speak.
Don't worry about that. Anyway, I think anybody understood your presentation. So we are supposed to do a 15 minutes, 20 minutes discussion, no more than 20, as far as I remember. We have been very, sharp. So the timing has been managed not by myself, but by all of you very well. So who has got questions? Who wants to break the ice, so to say? I have a question, for example, for Rosella, but let me first see whether you got question. I don't know, Sema, if you are still there, if there are other participants allowed to raise questions or...
Professor, no question on YouTube.
Okay, great. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sema. Thank you. So let's listen to, Rosella and Mustafa, if they've got questions to our respective presentations.
No, I have no questions because I just now I have to go with because I'm busy with my family just now,
Okay.
particularly with my children. So I have no question.
Okay, so if you have to go, I think yes, I can refrain from raising my question, and I think the discussion is over. I don't know whether Mustafa has got some question for, in this case, for me. If you also have to go, I guess, of course, that.
Thank you so much. Hope to see you soon, and particularly next time, next appointment of this symposium. Thank you very much.
Okay, either in Teramo or in Turkey, so Sema will invite us directly.
Yes, yes.
We
Okay.
got this crazy story.
Grazie per il tuo contributo.
Thank you.
Grazie mille.
Grazie a voi. Bye.
Buonasera.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye. So, Mustafa, have you got some question or should we stop here?
No, thank you so much.